Hey there folks, it's me TheTacticalBrit, your home of breakdowns, guides, and everything in between. And today, I want to talk to you about the Call of Duty beta. I've been playing it for more or less around about a day straight now, and I feel as though I've got a really good inclination as to what the issues are, where things are going well, where things are going badly, and today I wanted to give you a rundown. So let's start with the good. Well, Call of Duty is doing really well here, creating a really punchy and really fluid environment. I think there are very few situations in the game where you can say, that shouldn't have happened, or that was bullshit, or this bothered me. They've done a really great job. The gunplay is incredibly punchy. You feel as though all of your shots are making an impact, which is exactly what you want to feel from a game. And things like headshots definitely are making a significant difference, and it shows in terms of a skill gap. I found lots of situations where I can use guns in a certain manner, or I can aim for headshots, or I can even tap fire at certain ranges that are making a difference in terms of whether or not I'm getting kills. You know, just in general, you feel as though you have a full autonomy of everything that you're doing. The movement works pretty well as well. I've noticed that the sound and audio has certainly been refined. Footsteps are very audibly clear. And ultimately, here you go. You have this entire environment where gunplay feels impactful, where movement feels fluid, where it feels as though you can string together some really great plays, and that's exactly what you want from a situation like this. So all in all, so far, I've actually really enjoyed what I've played, and, you know, it's been enjoyable. It's something that makes me keep wanting to come back. I feel as though there's lots of things that I can do in terms of unlocking stuff in my weapons, and I'm sure in the final version of the game, we're going to have entire progression trees that are going to be great to use. But ultimately, I just think that the core gunplay experience is actually pretty good, and in terms of that, like, that's enough to make me continuing wanting to play. So now let's move on to things that aren't going quite so well. Well, I'm certainly noticing some discrepancies in animations, and this is something that you don't really want, especially in terms of consistency with first-person shooters. Sometimes when people are in crouching animations, they do this cross-body shot where their gun is facing towards you, but their body's almost in a flipped position, and it makes it really hard to tell whether or not they're looking at you, or whether or not they're engaging with you, or looking somewhere else. So that's something that I found to be a little frustrating. And my only other major complaint has really been spawns. I feel as though some of them haven't been that great. Something I've also noticed is that the weapons themselves have had a bit of a downgrade in terms of how they sound and how they look, in terms of things like smoke animations and stuff like that. Now, I'm not really sure the true reason behind this, but if I was to guess, it's because the weapon audio was overpowering footstep audio, so there's probably been an audio mix balance happening in that scenario that I think I've noticed in the game. A few other complaints as well on that front in terms of audio triggers and stuff like that is certainly some of the kill streaks. Like, the chopper gunner and stuff isn't too bad when it gets called in because you kind of know it's coming, but things like the ballistic missile, sometimes it almost feels as though you get like a second and a half to react to it actually coming into the map, and I don't really think that's conducive to a very fair gameplay experience, and I'd like to see some of that changed. Another issue I'm having as well is certainly some of the higher player count modes. This is something that I think is really in the testing phases, and I don't really know what the plan is for it, but when they start introducing things like 10v10 and 20v20 modes, things just get far too hectic. It becomes incredibly difficult to judge the flow of a map, and I really do feel as though that kind of discrepancy in gameplay is not something that I find conducive to a good experience. I haven't really played those modes because I tried them like once or twice and I was like, hold up, there's like somebody always in front of me every 2 seconds. And I'm afraid, like, these higher player count modes, unless they come with a larger map or a larger scale map, are simply not really worth playing so far. I do believe that there will be larger scale maps that they will work on, just so far the ones I've played have not really been that. But on the flip side of that, as a positive thing, Headquarters is without a doubt a shining star in the new Modern Warfare game. It really has some great experience, lots of strong objective gameplay. You really can understand where enemies are coming from, especially if you're using things like the compass, and that makes me quite excited for some of the other modes like, you know, search and destroy and stuff like that, because you'll really have a good idea and good indication of where people are and what you're doing in that situation. But now to talk about some things that I've noticed people complaining about. Now, I reckon that that is as far as my complaints list goes. I don't really have any issues in terms of what's happening in game. I feel like a lot of the situations I've had have been very fair engagements. I don't feel as though I've ever really been cheated out of a situation. But let's talk about some of the things that people are talking about. So number one is the minimap. Now, the minimap for me, this blows my mind because I do not want a return to red dot chasing. I do not want it to be mandatory to slap a suppressor on every individual weapon that I'm using in game in order to avoid being seen 24/7. Now, you have a compass which very easily indicates where enemies are coming from, and once you've played 2 or 3 games on a map, you have a rough idea of what situations you're going to find yourself in, where people come from, and where people attack from. And with that, that's all the information you need. You don't need a minimap to understand the rest of the map. It's a huge handhold feature. It shouldn't be in the game. Neither should red dots on a minimap be in the game. That shouldn't be a thing. And there are plenty of UAVs and personal UAVs as it presently stands to avoid this really being an issue in the first place. And I really just don't like this hand-holding reliance on minimaps. I think you just have to take the time to learn the map, learn the vantage points, and truth be told, just stop being a bitch. Like, that's the basic way to go about it. Like, get good. That's the simple way to say there shouldn't be a minimap in this game. And another huge thing I'm noticing is people talking about camping, and I think that's just because a lot of people are playing TDM, and if you're playing TDM, then that's just everything that happens in any TDM on any game, because people are inclined to getting kills as huge as they can. They're not really looking for objective gameplay. It doesn't force people to play in a certain play style, and therefore people will camp. But even on some of the objective-based modes, well, yeah, once somebody locks down an objective, they're not going to move from the location. It's down to you to try and figure out how you can make that happen. And there are some really intelligent ways of doing that. A lot of people don't realize this, but there are entire hardcore parkour situations. There's also places where you can throw grenades in between gaps, and there's also places where you can rebound grenades off of walls in order to make flanking objectives pretty easy. It actually makes it very easy to clear out objectives, and it only takes one aggressive push for 1 or 2 players who know where to throw these grenades and know where to kind of make these pushes happen to make something happen in the game. And I've noticed this quite well. I'm also seeing that this is just a meta shift because a lot of people just aren't using their tactical grenades. You should be using flashbangs on a regular basis. If you find yourself in an aggressive situation where you're pushing a building, you should always be using a flashbang grenade. You should always be using a stun grenade or something that is going to give you an advantage in that situation. So many times people just rush into buildings, and I have this happen all the time, and it's how I get kills, because they just run in without any indication that I'm there. Or even if they know I'm there, they don't take the time to throw a flashbang or throw a grenade or just throw something that's going to change the scape of the engagement. If you have an objective or a building where somebody can lock down the entrance points, it just doesn't make sense for you to just not try anything. You have to flush them out. You have to force them to play in a certain playstyle that you can counteract, not the other way around. And I really do hope that people start understanding this, and once we see more of that, I think it's safe to say that, you know, people will stop complaining about camping because it just isn't really an issue. I haven't encountered it, and when people do camp, it's very easy to kill them. I think a lot of the complaints that you're seeing online, and especially in social media, are people who are coming from older Call of Duties who aren't used to this meta shift, and because they aren't used to this meta shift, they're struggling, and they're going to be struggling at the start, especially when you don't know the map layouts, especially when you don't know what objectives are happening. I think that's a huge issue, and I think a lot of these initial complaints are going to slow down eventually. Like, you're going to see people go, here's my compass. Oh, I know this map layout. Oh, by the way, I have lots of flashbangs that I'm using frequently. And this is a meta change that people are just simply going to have to get used to, which just makes life a lot easier. I think this is a complaint that's going to go downhill, and it really is going to take a couple of days for people to go, well, actually, no, this is a problem. This isn't a problem. Which is why my complaint list has been relatively limited so far. I think a lot of people would have a lot more complaints about the beta, but for me personally, I still know that I'm getting to grips with certain elements of the game, and I still know that in a lot of situations where some people would say, you know, that's bullshit, I would say, actually, I got outplayed, or that guy just outshot me, or they just did better than me. And that's just a general discrepancy I notice with a lot of people in general, not just, you know, new players and old players. Just it's a generic thing that happens when you have a new release. But that's about it from me today, TheTacticalBrit. Let me know what you guys are thinking in the comment section below if you've got hands-on, or let me know what your concerns are if you haven't. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon in another one.